Hey everyone, it's that math magician. On this video, we're going to continue our topic on circles, but this time for this video, we're going to focus solely on the circumference of a circle. Now, if you haven't yet, I would go and watch my definition and introduction video to circles, where I sort of go over the key components of circles. It's going to be very important for you to know that before we jump into this video. But if you have seen it, then let's go ahead and talk about the circumference of a circle. In that previous video, we mentioned that the circumference of a circle is really just the perimeter of the circle, right? It's the distance going around that entire circle, and sometimes in math classes or in real world life applications, we want to find out what that length is. Well, what's really nice is that we actually have a formula to find the circumference for any circle, and that formula is circumference equals 2 pi r, where r represents our radius. So as long as you know the radius of your circle, you can find the length of that circumference by just multiplying it by 2 pi. So let's say, for example, my circle here had a radius. I see it's already drawn out in green, but let's say that that radius had a length of 6. So let's say 6 inches. And I want to find out what the circumference is. Well, I have that formula up there. I know that it's 2 pi times r, my radius. So I know that I'll just have to take that formula and substitute in 6 for my r, my radius. Well, once that's in there, I see that there are two numbers I can multiply. 2 times 6. 2 times 6 is going to make 12. I still have the pi there, and that's going to be 12 pi inches. And I'm actually going to stop right there. Now, I know some of you know that pi equals 3.14. It actually equals a lot more than just 3.14. It's an irrational number that does go on for infinity. Now, when we're dealing with circles and we're trying to find the circumference, we could take 12 and multiply it by pi in our calculator, and we'll end up with this really long string of decimal numbers that really just doesn't make sense for us to write down. Instead, when you come across problems like this, it's okay to leave it just like that, which we refer to as pi form. Pi form means you want to leave the pi value there. You don't actually have to multiply it into 12. And you're going to notice that as you move on into higher level math classes, past geometry, you're going to find that you're usually just going to leave it in pi form. We don't want to deal with all those decimal places and the numbers after it. Instead, let's just leave it as 12 pi inches. Now, let's try another example. Let's say for this example, instead of knowing the radius, let's say that I'm given let's get that ruler out. Let's say that I'm given the diameter of this circle. And let's say I'm given that the diameter, let's get that off. Let's say that I'm given that the diameter is 22 inches. So I want to find the circumference. Well, what I can't do is I can't take that equation or that formula and I can't just plug in 22. Because remember, for this formula up here, I'll go ahead and highlight it for us. We need the radius. In this example here, I have the diameter. And so I can't just use the diameter here because this formula only works when we have the radius. Now, I do know that the diameter is 22 inches. And from our previous video, we mentioned that the radius is always half of the diameter. So if the diameter is 22 inches, then that means that the radius is just 11 inches. So I can now plug that number into my formula, 11. I'll take 2 and I'll multiply it by the 11 and I'll get 22. Don't forget to include the pi and your units, inches. That is the circumference for this circle. Now you might be noticing something here, and it's something that does deserve our attention. The diameter is 22 inches and the circumference is 22 pi inches. Notice that the diameter's number is showing up in our circumference. And let's look up here to that previous example. Remember, we had our radius as 6 inches. Well, if the radius is 6 inches, we double it to get the diameter. And 6 times 2 gives us 12. You might be noticing that the circumference can also rely on your diameter. Notice in our equation here, in our formula, we have 2 times r. Well, 2 times the radius. If you have 2 radiuses, as we see over there, 2 radiuses make a whole diameter. So instead of having the circumference formula being 2 pi r, I can replace the 2 and the r with the letter d for diameter. So for circumference, there are actually 2 types of formulas. One is the one on top there that includes the radius. The other formula you can use is just pi times your diameter. Both of these formulas are going to find the circumference for any circle you come across, and it just depends on what information you're given. If you're given the diameter, use this one. Slap a pi on it, and now you know what the diameter is. If you're given the radius, well, you got to use the radius in that formula, but you got to double it and then put a pi on that as well. 2 formulas for finding the circumference, which is nice for you because that means you have 2 different avenues to finding your circumference of your circle. It's that Math Magician, and I'll see you on the next video.